I was on my way to bury the only man who would have believed what happened that morning. I had a window seat in the back of the airplane, paid for with my own card, on an airline I built from one leased turboprop and a handshake. The young man at the gate did not know any of that. He knew only that I did not look like I belonged, and he had decided, before I ever reached his podium, that my not belonging was going to be the most interesting part of his shift. His name tag said, Devin. He stood at the head of the jet bridge like a man guarding something that mattered, scanning the boarding line for problems. And when his eyes got to me, they stopped the way eyes do when they have found their problem for the day. I want you to picture me the way Devin did. A man of 54 in a windbreaker gone soft at the elbows, grey stubble, a ball cap with no logo, a canvas duffel that had been to more places than most people will ever go, shoes that were comfortable and not much else. I had not shaved because I had been awake since 2 in the morning, sitting at my kitchen table, holding a thing in my hand that I will tell you about, trying to decide whether I had the legs to make the trip at all. So I looked tired and plain and poor. And in an airport that is the same as looking like trouble. Before I tell you how the morning went, do something for me. The next time you are in a room and watch somebody decide a stranger does not belong, look away from the one doing the deciding and find the person in that room who treats the stranger like a human being anyway. That is the person this story is really about. Hold the thought. You will meet her. Here is the part Devin did not know. My name is Ellis Boyd, and 40 years ago, I started the airline whose logo was printed on the carpet he was standing on. I did not start it the way they teach it in the business schools. I started it because I had been a ramp rat, 19 years old, loading bags in the rain for a big carrier out of Salt Lake. Invisible, the way the men who handle your suitcases are always invisible. And one night, a gate agent for that carrier, a man not unlike Devin, caught me cutting through the empty first-class cabin to get to a jammed forward bin. And he stopped the whole boarding process to make a show of me. He told me, in front of a plane full of people, that people like me did not walk through the front of the airplane. People like me belonged in the back, with the bags, where nobody had to look at us. I was soaked to the skin, and I had a wrench in my hand, and I said nothing, because a ramp rat who talks back does not have a job in the morning. I had a friend on that ramp. His name was Harold Dunn, and everyone called him Hap, because he was, against all available evidence, a happy man. Hap was loading the same bags in the same rain, and that night, after the gate agent finished with me, Hap looked at the lit-up belly of that aeroplane, and he said the sentence that built the rest of my life. He said, "One day we are going to run a place where there is no back of the aeroplane, where every seat is the same kind of human." It took us 11 years, and the 11 years nearly killed both of us. We started with one leased turboprop that had a leak in the cabin roof, on the one route the big carriers did not want, the short hop between 2 mountain towns nobody important needed to be in. We mortgaged everything a man can mortgage and a few things he should not. There was a winter we did not pay ourselves, and a spring the bank called the note, and Hap sold his truck and his late father's watch to make payroll for 11 people, because he could not stand the idea of a single one of them going home to tell their kids the airline folded. We crawled out of a bankruptcy on our hands and knees, and the very first thing we printed, before we had a logo, before we had a second airplane, was a single page that hung in the break room, and the page said, "There is no front and no back of the airplane. Every seat is the same kind of human." We printed the principle before we printed the schedule. That was the order Hap insisted on, and I never argued with him about it once. We did it. We built Granite Air, and the morning of our very first flight, the two of us stood on the tarmac in the dark, and neither of us could afford a real set of captain's wings, so Hap had gone to a pawn shop the week before and bought 2 cheap brass pins, the kind that turn your shirt green, and he pinned one on me and I pinned one on him, and he said, "There, now we are a real airline." I have carried both of those pins for 40 years. I had them in my windbreaker pocket that morning at the gate, his and mine, because Hap had died on Tuesday, and I was flying to Montana to put him in the ground. So that is the man Devin saw. A tired old fellow in a cheap windbreaker who looked like he belonged in the back. He had no idea he was looking at the back of the airplane itself, made into a man, come back to fly his own creation to a funeral. And I had no intention of telling him. There were two reasons I did not just say who I was, and I have turned them over many times since. The first is that I was not flying as the chairman of anything that morning. I was flying as the kid Hap pinned the wings on. We always flew in the back when we could, the two of us, in the cheap seats with the crew and the regular people, because that was the whole point of the thing we built. And to walk up to that podium and announce my name would have been to spend Hap's funeral pulling the one piece of rank we spent our whole lives swearing we would never pull. The second reason is quieter and worse. I had heard, the last few years, that my airline was not my airline anymore. That somewhere in the growing and the merging and the rooms full of consultants, the back of the airplane had quietly come back. Granite had become a thing with a marketing department and a loyalty program full of tiers, gold and platinum, and some tier above platinum whose name I can never keep straight. And a tier is only ever a polite way of printing the words front and back on a human being, which is the precise thing the page in the break room was written to forbid. A woman had sent me a letter the winter before, forwarded up through 3 assistants until it reached my kitchen table, about being made to stand and wait at a gate while the better-tiered passengers were called ahead of her, and a clerk said the quiet part out loud about people in her boarding group. At the bottom she had written one line, "I thought this airline was supposed to be different." I had kept that letter. I had not answered it, because I did not yet have an answer I was proud of. And some cowardly, grieving part of me wanted to stand in that line as a nobody on the morning I lost Hap, and find out, with my own skin, whether the thing the two of us built had outlived the both of us, or only him. I found out fast. The agent in front of me was processing the line with the particular joy of a man who does not get to feel powerful very often and has just been handed a podium and a microphone. I would learn, over the next 40 minutes, more about Devin than he would have liked. He had been passed over for a supervisor slot 3 times. There was a station manager doing walkthroughs that week, evaluating gate staff, and Devin had decided that the way to look like a supervisor was to enforce every rule in the book with maximum visible rigor, on the theory that cruelty photographs as competence. He was not, at bottom, a cruel man. He was a frightened one, hiding inside a rulebook. Because a rulebook is the only thing in an airport that a passed-over man can hold over somebody else's head. I have known 100 Devins. I was nearly one myself, on a ramp, before Hap talked me out of it. He called the boarding groups in his clipped little announcer's voice, and when my group came up, I stepped to the podium and held out my phone with the pass on it. He did not scan it. He looked at me first. "This is general boarding," he said. "You'll want to wait for your group." "This is my group," I said. "Group 4. He took my phone like it might be sticky, and he scanned it. And the machine chirped its happy little green chirp, and a flicker of disappointment crossed his face, because the machine had said yes, and he had wanted to say no. He found his second chance in the duffel. He pointed at Hap's bag with the end of his pen. "That's going to be too big for the bin," he said. "It'll have to be gate-checked. Tag it and leave it on the bridge." It was not too big. I had set it in the sizer out in the terminal an hour before. Out of an old habit, the way I have checked every carry-on I have owned for 40 years. And it slid into the frame with daylight on every side. But there is no arguing with a man who has already decided, and I understood, fast, what gate-checking it meant. Hap's duffel would go down into the belly of the airplane, and the 2 pawnshop wings clipped to its strap would go with it, into the dark of the cargo hold, out of my reach for 5 hours on the worst morning of my year. I heard myself start to say the wrong thing. I started to tell him that the bag met the carry-on dimensions printed on page 19 of the contract of carriage. a sentence I happen to know by heart for the simple reason that I wrote page 19. I got as far as the word met before I closed my mouth on the rest of it. I unclipped the 2 wings from the strap, quietly, and folded them into my fist. And I said, instead, that I would be glad to set the bag in the sizer right there if he cared to watch. He looked at the sizer. He looked at the lines stacking up behind me, and the arithmetic of being publicly wrong in front of an audience he was trying to impress did the work my mouth had almost done. "Carry it then," he said, waving me off. "Don't let it block the aisle. And sir," he waited until I turned. "First class is at the front. You'll be walking through it to get to the back. Keep moving through, please. Don't stop. Don't touch the seats. Don't bother the passengers up there. They've paid for a certain experience." I had built an airline specifically so that sentence could never be said on it. And there it was, said to me, on it, by a boy wearing my logo on his vest. I felt the old wrench in the hand feeling, the soaked to the skin feeling. 40 years gone and right back in my chest. The thing I most wanted to say was already half-formed. There is no front and back of the airplane on this airline. I wrote that. It is the first line of the handbook you signed. I did not say it. I picked up Hap's duffel, and I went down the bridge. That was the first of it, and it cost me more than it should have, because of the date on the calendar. But it was nothing next to what waited at the front of the aeroplane. His name, I would later learn from his very loud complaining, was Chase Mercer, and he had paid for seat 2A, and he had a great deal to say about who got to exist near it. I was 3 rows into the first-class cabin, moving through exactly as instructed, eyes forward, when Chase looked up from his phone, took me in, and made a small sound of disgust. The sound a man makes when something has gotten on his shoe. "Excuse me," he said, to the flight attendant working the forward galley. "Is this going to be a thing? Are they just going to march these people through here? These people." I kept walking. "There's a curtain for a reason," Chase said, louder, performing now for the cabin. "I didn't pay 4 times the fare to have the bus station walk past my seat. Can we get him moved through faster? Or, I don't know, board the back of the plane from the back?" It was the flight attendant who answered him. And this is where you meet her, so pay attention, because she is the only person in this story who behaved like the airline I built. Her name was Renee. She was 46 years old. She had been flying for 22 years. She was raising a teenage daughter by herself in a city she could barely afford. And she had the calm of a woman who has handled 40,000 strangers and is not going to be rattled by the 40,001st. She stepped between me and Chase, not dramatically, just enough. And she said to him, pleasant as Sunday, "Everybody boards through the same door, sir. Always have. Can I get you a water before we push back?" And then she turned to me, and she did the thing. She looked me in the eye, the way you look at a person and not at a problem, and she said, "Take your time, hun. The aisle's all yours. You good with that bag?" "I've got it," I said. "Thank you." She saw the wings then. I had clipped Hap's pin and mine to the strap of the duffel that morning, 2 cheap brass wings going green at the edges, because I could not stand to have them in a pocket where I could not feel them. Renee looked at the pins, and she looked at me, and something passed over her face, some flicker of a flight attendant who has seen real crew wings and knows these were not those, and were somehow more. She did not ask. She just said, quietly, "Those are nice," and she let me pass. I went to the back of the airplane, to my window seat in the last row but one, and I sat down next to the lavatory where it smells like blue chemicals, and I held the duffel on my lap. Out the window, the morning sun had come up over the wing, and on the wing was the logo Hap and I had argued about for a week before we settled it, a simple grey mountain with the sun behind it. And I sat there looking at our mountain on the wing of a jet we never in our wildest nights thought we would own. On the morning I was flying to bury the man who drew the first version of it on a napkin. I will tell you that I came very close, in that seat, to getting up and walking back off the airplane and driving to Montana instead, which is a 14-hour drive. I did not have the years left in me to make lightly. I am an old man, and I had just been made small in the place I had built, specifically so that no one would be, and the simplest thing in the world would have been to go sit in my truck where nobody knew me and grieve in peace. What stopped me from getting off was that I needed to see how the rest of it went. And what the rest of it was Devin. Because Chase Mercer was not done. Entitled men are never done. The complaint is the meal, and they want a second helping. He had pressed his call button, and he had asked for a supervisor. And instead of a supervisor, he got the gate agent, Devin, who came striding down the bridge and onto the airplane with his lanyard swinging, thrilled, because here at last was a chance to be seen solving a problem in front of the very weak he needed to impress. Chase pointed back through the cabin at me, the way you point at a stray dog. "That man," he said, "I want to know that man is supposed to be on this flight. He came through here. He's clearly not. Look at him. I'd like him checked." And Devin, who had already scanned my valid boarding pass not 20 minutes before, who knew for a fact I was supposed to be on that flight, looked down the length of the airplane at the tired old man in the windbreaker, and he made a calculation. He could tell Chase the truth, that the passenger was fine and to please sit down, or he could perform. He could march to the back and put on a show of authority for the angry rich man and the watching cabin, and look for 90 seconds. Like the supervisor, he had been denied 3 times. He chose the show. He came down the aisle to my row, and he planted himself, and he said, loud enough for half the airplane, "Sir, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass and a photo ID." "You scanned my pass at the gate," I said. "I need to see it again." He held out his hand. "There's been a question raised about whether you're ticketed for this cabin." This cabin, the back of the airplane, the cheapest seat on the manifest, by the toilet. There was no cabin to be ticketed for. He knew it. He just wanted me to perform my own smallness for him, to dig out my phone and my wallet and prove, for the audience, that the poor old man had permission to take up space. I set the duffel on my knees, and I started to reach for my phone, slowly, the way you move when a man has made a show of you, and there is no graceful way out of the show. A woman across the aisle was filming it on her phone, the way people do now, and a child 2 rows up had turned around to watch over the seat back with the frank curiosity of the young. And somewhere ahead of us, Chase Mercer had twisted around in 2A to enjoy the thing he had started. I had handed a man with a clipboard a clean opening to make me the entertainment, and he was taking it. And the worst of it was that I understood the pleasure he was taking, because I had once stood on a ramp wanting that exact feeling and not knowing yet that it was poison. And here is the moment the whole morning had been walking toward. The moment I have thought about more than any other, because it is the closest I came to ending it the wrong way. It was not Devin's question that nearly undid me. It was what he said to Renee. Because Renee had come back down the aisle, quietly, and she had said, "Devin, he's fine. I watched him board, leave the gentleman be." And Devin, in front of everyone, turned on her. He told her that she had a habit of being soft, that it was no wonder she was still a line flyer at her age, that he would be noting in his report that the crew on this flight had a problem with letting standards slip, and that if she liked her job, she would step back and let him do his. Watching a small man with a clipboard threaten a good woman's living to quiet his own fear did the thing that 40 years of being called the wrong names never quite had. I was on my feet. I had the words in my mouth, all of them, my name and his handbook and the line about the front and the back of the airplane and exactly whose carpet he was standing on. And I was going to spend it all, right there, to save Renee her job. What stopped me was my hand. It had closed, without my telling it to, around the 2 brass pins on the duffel strap. And I heard Hap, plain as the engines spinning up, the thing he said to me 1,000 times across 40 years. Every time I wanted to fix a problem by being the biggest man in the room, he used to say, We don't pull rank, Ellis. We fix the gate. Pulling rank just proves the kid was right that rank is the thing that matters. You want to beat him. Build a place where he can't happen. So I did not announce myself to save Renee. I sat back down. And I trusted, the way I had trusted Hap for 40 years, that the right thing was already coming. Because I had hired it and trained it and built it, even if I had started to doubt, it was still there. It was still there. Its name was Lorraine Acker. Captain Acker had been listening to the whole thing on the flight deck, through an open cabin door, and a crew that had quietly clued her in. And Captain Acker did not care for any of it. She came out of the flight deck in her 4 stripes, and she walked back through first class, past a suddenly quiet Chase Mercer. And she came down the aisle to my row, where Devin was still standing over me with his hand out. I had hired Lorraine Acker 25 years ago. She had been a ramp agent, like me, loading bags, with a private pilot's license she had paid for by not eating, and a stack of rejection letters from every carrier that did not hire women into cockpits in those years. I had pulled her file off the bottom of a stack and made her one of the first women to wear 4 stripes for Granite Air. She had not seen me in person in a decade, but there are some faces you do not forget. And she had pinned my picture on the wall of her first apartment as the man who gave her the sky. She stopped. She looked at the old man in the windbreaker the gate agent was leaning over, and her hand came up to her mouth. "Mr. Boyd?" she said. The airplane did not understand. Not yet. But Devin understood that a captain had just said a name with an awe in it that he had never once heard directed at himself. And his hand, the one held out for my identification, began very slowly to lower. "Laurie," I said, "you made captain. Hap always said you would." "Mr. Boyd." She was blinking hard. "Sir, I didn't... Nobody told me you were... What are you doing in seat 31? "Flying to a funeral," I said. "In the back, where I like it. Hap died on Tuesday." I watched her take that in, the whole airplane watching her now, and I watched her decide that the moment was bigger than her grief, and put the grief away for later, the way good captains do. She straightened up. She turned to Devin, who had gone the grey of a man feeling the floor tilt. "This," she said to him, and to the cabin, evenly, "is Ellis Boyd. He and Harold Dunn founded this airline. His name is on the dedication in the lobby of headquarters that you walk past every morning. His signature is on the first page of the handbook you signed when you took this job, the page with the line that I have had memorized since I was a ramp agent, which reads, 'There is no front and no back of the airplane. Every seat is the same kind of human.'" The silence on that aeroplane had a weight to it. Somewhere behind me, a passenger started, quietly, to clap, then thought better of being the only one, and stopped. Because it was not that kind of moment, and the cabin seemed to know it. Chase Mercer was studying his own lap, as though it had become very interesting. And Devin stood in the aisle holding out his empty hand, the hand that had wanted my papers. And you could see the whole shape of the morning rearrange itself behind his eyes. Every moment of it. The line at the gate, the show in first class, the threat to Renee. All of it performed for an evaluation. All of it directly on top of the one man in the world whose opinion of a Granite Air gate agent actually decided anything. He started to say something, an apology, or an excuse. They sound the same when they come out that fast. I held up a hand and stopped him, because I had no interest in watching him grovel. There is no satisfaction in it for me. I have buried too much of my life to enjoy the small fear of a frightened man. "You don't have to do that," I told him, and I meant it kindly, which I think unsettled him more than anything else could have. "Son, I was you, on a ramp in the rain, a long time ago. I figured the way up was to find somebody below me and stand on him. A man named Hap, who I am flying to bury, talked me out of it, and it was the best thing anyone ever did for me. So I'm going to tell you the one true thing I know. The rule book isn't a weapon. We didn't write it to give you something to hold over people. We wrote it to protect them from days exactly like the one you just gave that man and that crew. I looked at him a moment. You hid inside it. I understand why. But you broke the only rule in it that ever mattered. And you did it because you were scared of a man with a clipboard. There are better things to be scared of being. Be scared of being small. I did not raise my voice once. I have learned that the quiet way of saying a hard thing leaves no place for a man to hide, while shouting hands him a door. The rest of it took care of itself, the way these things do once the truth is standing in the aisle in 4 stripes. The station manager Devon had spent the whole week performing for had, it turned out, been doing her walkthrough on the bridge and had followed the captain onto the airplane. She had seen the last of it with her own eyes. Devon was walked off the airplane before we pushed back, not fired on the spot, because I asked her, quietly, not to fire him on the spot. Not out of softness, out of the only thing I have ever found that actually changes a Devon, which is to make him spend a while learning the job from the bottom, where the people he stepped on stand, until he understands in his body what the handbook only told him in words. He went back to the bottom. I am told he is, against the odds, getting better. I hope it is true. It is the only revenge worth the trouble of taking. Chase Mercer received the experience he had paid 4 times the fare for, which was to spend a 5-hour flight in seat 2A, having watched the entire airplane learn that the man he called the bus station was the man who built the bus. No one was rude to him. We do not do that. He was simply, for 5 hours, exactly as important as everyone else, which to a man like Chase is its own kind of prison. And Renee, who had stepped between me and a rich man's contempt before she had any idea who I was, when there was nothing in it for her but the risk of a bad report from a man who had just threatened her job. Renee, who treated the back of the airplane like the front because to her there had never been a difference. I did not have to reward Renee for being the airline I built, but I got to, and you do not pass up a chance like that. She is a Czech airman now, which is the flyer who trains and certifies the new crews, which means that every flight attendant who puts on a Granite Air uniform from here forward learns how to do the job from the one person on that aeroplane who already understood the whole point of it. I did not have to invent the role for her. She had earned it twice over and been passed for it by people who mistook her calm for a lack of ambition, the same way they had mistaken Laurie's, the same way an airport had once mistaken mine. The airline pays for her daughter's college now, quietly, the way I have learned to do things, through a fund that does not have my name on it. And somewhere over Idaho, when the seatbelt sign went off and the cabin settled into the long middle hours of a flight, she came back to my row and sat down on her jump seat across from me for a minute. And I took Hap's wings off the duffel strap, the pawn shop pin going green at the edges, the one he bought the week before our first flight, and I pinned it on her. I've been carrying 2 of these for 40 years, I told her. One's mine. This one belonged to the man who taught me there's no back of the aeroplane. I'm flying to bury him today. He'd want it up here working. He never could stand to see a good thing sitting in a drawer. She did not make a speech. She is not a speech kind of person, which is part of why I trust her. She just put her hand over the pin for a second, and she said, "I'll keep it up here where it can see out." And she went back to work, because there were drinks to pour in the back, where the same kind of humans were sitting. I buried Hap 2 days later, in the rain, which would have made him laugh, because it was raining the night on the ramp when he first told me about the airplane with no back. There were maybe 60 people at the graveside, and more than half of them had worn a Granite uniform at one time or another. Gate agents and mechanics and flyers, and a retired baggage handler in his 80s who had been employee number 9. They did not come for the chairman. They came for Hap, who had learned all their kids' names, who covered shifts, who once drove a stranded crew 4 hours through a blizzard in his own car so a flight full of strangers could get home for Christmas. A man's real size is measured at the graveside, by who stands in the rain for him, and Hap stood about as tall as a man can stand. I pinned my own wings to his jacket before they closed the casket. The pawn shop pin gone soft and green, his fingerprints worn into the back of it next to mine. He started the whole trip with those wings. It seemed right that he finish it wearing one, while I keep flying with the other. So here is what I would ask of you, since you came all this way with me. The next time a stranger gets treated like they belong in the back, do not waste your attention on the one doing the treating. Find the Renee. Find the person who steps between, with nothing to gain and a report to lose, and treats the stranger like a human being because to them there was never another option. Then go be that person at least once before the week is out. It is the only thing I have ever found that actually builds anything worth keeping. The boy at the gate thought he was guarding something that morning. He had it exactly backwards. He was standing on it,